I'm Ann Gibbs, and I served on the Immigration Committee.
My name is Lee Ton, and I was on the International Relations and Peacemaking Committee.
I'm Mary Carlin. I served on the Mission Coordination Committee. Our work had to do with the financial and budgetary concerns of the church. And our biggest issue that we spent a lot of time discussing was around a recommendation to restructure the existing special offerings that the Presbyterian Church has been using for a lot of years.
I'm Deb Ergison-Graham. I was on the Civil Union and Marriage Committee, or Committee 13, which should tell you something about the committee.
What challenged me most about attending General Assembly was at times the level of divisiveness that I felt in the room. There were many important issues that we were discussing that affected the level of the church and what we would do together as a body. And often the decisions were so split, sometimes between 1 and 2 votes of a marginal difference, that it seemed clear that we were two different churches. And yet at the same time, I was often gratified that we were still having this conversation together.
Challenges, well, there were a few. Filibusters come to mind in terms of committee work and how the actual work of the committee got postponed until late in the evening when everyone was exhausted as opposed to earlier in the day. And that became very frustrating and quite the challenge for many of us on the committee. Another frustration was just not being able to see us come together as one church, but seeing us definitely as a divided church.
My biggest challenge at General Assembly was the vote for the vice moderator. When we voted for Tara Spieler-McCabe, the issues that concerned some people were raised at the vote, and the vote was 60-40 in favor of confirming her. And then when plenary session met again after the committees, there had been apparently a lot of chatter behind the scenes and on the internet about concerns with her. So we started out our plenary session with her resigning her position. To me, it felt like it was a bad start to the whole conversation.
One of my greatest challenges at this General Assembly was around the decision-making process and the manner in which it often felt like we as a body, both in committee and on the General Assembly floor, were spending a lot of time in process. One example would be that for one of the issues that came to the floor, we spent, I believe, a good 2 hours simply talking about how we were going to engage the conversation without ever quite getting to the issue itself. It took us that long to get to the issue. And I think the biggest reason this challenges me is because there were 2, maybe 3 issues presented on the floor of the General Assembly that received a whole lot of time and attention in discussion. And what that did was it made for important issues to not receive the time, or frankly the energy, by the time we got around to voting on them on the floor. My inspiration at this General Assembly, I believe, is twofold. First of all, I'm a lifelong Presbyterian, and what I'm reminded at these sorts of gatherings is the true connectional nature of our denomination. I go to these things and see people I know that I will see, and see a lot of people from my life that I don't expect to see and I'm surprised to see. And there's a wonderful reminder in that about who we are as a greater body. And in addition to that, getting to meet and make a lot of new connections, including for me, the other commissioners and the youth delegate who came from the Presbytery of Milwaukee. The other piece that I found quite inspiring were the worship services. And it was amazing to me how timely they often seemed, especially as the week went on, for inspiring and powerful preaching and just a sharing of the word at a time when we as the rest of the body needed that in order to move forward in a helpful manner.
I was really inspired by the divisiveness at the General Assembly. And I know that sounds odd, but what it signaled to me was that people were still coming to the table. Despite all of the conversations about congregations that are leaving the denomination, there were still people there of all persuasions. And I felt really inspired by that fact, that they were still there wanting to have the conversation, wanting to do the work through our denomination.
What inspired me most at General Assembly were the 1001 worshiping congregations. Throughout our denomination, there is this great movement to be inspired by what local congregations are doing in their areas, sometimes missionally, sometimes in outreach to people who are least likely to be attending a church. And these 1001 congregations were lifted up at different times during the assembly, and often at times when it felt like we were most disagreeing. For me, in these moments, to have the 1001 worshiping congregations be celebrated showed that the church was greater than what we were disagreeing on at the time. Another inspiring moment came at the very beginning of the assembly when we had Riverside Conversations. These conversations were on a number of different issues that were affecting the church, and it allowed us, before we had to vote on decisions and vote on these issues, to come together as a body and really discuss and discern them together. It allowed me to work together with people that I would not normally have worked with, to discern with people I would not otherwise have had an opportunity to talk with, and to really be more inspired and more informed on important decisions affecting the church.
My inspiration at General Assembly were a couple things. I had a couple of inspirations. One was the music from the new hymnal that we were able to sing with the hymnal committee and on the floor of the assembly itself. And the other was worship and the amazing preachers that took one passage from Mark, and we heard several different sermons on it that were great. And then also the commissioning of new mission co-workers around the world, and the fact that this is the 175th anniversary of mission co-workers in the Presbyterian Church, and how exciting it is that we have been involved in mission around the world over all these years. One more thing that was great, and that was being with Mary and Ann and Lee and Travis and having a wonderful time together.